everyone. My name is Rafal, and I would like to welcome everyone to my Hatchet Photography podcast. Today, I have a special guest. Pete Coco is with me. He's second time on the podcast, which is amazing. He's a fantastic headshot photographer. I'm sure everyone knows him very well. He doesn't need much introduction. He's also amazing musician. So that's where your background is. So that's how you started your artistic career, I guess, and then you just switch or kind of get into photography. But welcome back. We briefly chat before we jump online. Um, that we have a lot of topics to cover today. This entire industry is going into some, I don't know how we can even say it, to something completely new. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of exciting things, in my opinion. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this discussion because you have also very unique perspective on a lot of things. You've got experience from, I would say, also different industry like music, right? Which also I would say maybe it's not similar, but I think the structure is similar. So welcome back, and let's jump right into it.
Thanks, Rafal. It's so great to be here, and yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation. And let's get into it.
Sure. So let's start with the most, I would say, controversial topic, and let's talk a little bit about AI. We spoke a little bit, and I've been getting a lot of emails, a lot of messages from a lot of photographers. And from one hand, there's a lot of excitement. People are kind of looking forward to what this AI is going to bring to the table, how we can improve our business, how we can speed up some of those processes we daily work on. But there's also a lot of fear. I've noticed that a lot of people are just literally freaking out that there's end of photography. There is something that is going to ruin our business. So what's your take on it? And then I think there's a lot of angles, so let's kind of start breaking this apart, and then
Right,
let's kind of having discussion about all those elements.
right. Well, the first thing I think is that it's here to stay. So there's no reason and there's no benefit to being afraid and ignoring it. So the first thing we as photographers have to deal with is this is happening whether we like it or not. Clearly, this is happening in almost every industry at this time. So I think there's a lot of fear out there, and fear, being afraid, and all of that isn't going to help anyone. It's not going to help your business. It's not going to help you succeed. So I think the first thing we need to think about as photographers is how do we manage and survive and thrive in the new landscape. So this is something I've talked about with a lot of my mentors and a lot of photographers who I respect greatly, and who have more experience than I do. A lot of my friends in the headshot crew, for instance, we've been talking about AI, and they tend to agree with me where I see things going, at least in the short term, hopefully in the long term. But I think that it's a wake up call, first of all, to us as photographers, that if we're providing a commodity, a $99 headshot, for instance, that almost anyone can do, that's really serving sort of a low tier clientele. I think if that's where you are in your journey, then yes, I would be worried in the short term, because I feel like the person who is going to want a very inexpensive headshot is going to be the same person who will pay $17 for some AI thing to make 50 headshots and then just pick the one that they're most happy with. But I think there's always going to be a place for real photographers, because photography, the thing that's the best part about it, the thing that I love the most, is interacting with people. And so what we do when you're doing it on a higher level, when you're really doing something that's connecting with people, they're not going to get that obviously from AI. And So that's kind of in a nutshell how I'm looking at it temporarily.
Mhm.
But I was thinking about this the other day, and I thought about a time where I had gone to do some architectural photos of this like 6-story brownstone in Manhattan. It was like a some billionaire was renovating the whole thing.
Mhm.
And so I'm in this building and I'm just taking some photos and I see this lady and she's in the corner and she's got a little paintbrush and I'm like and she's just like has a little palette and she's painting against the wall. And so I'm like, what in the world is this lady doing? So I go up to her and I say, excuse me, but I'm just wondering, what are you doing? And so she says to me, well, they hired me, the owner of the house, to paint every light switch and outlets cover, every light and outlet cover to match whatever the wall paper or the
Oh,
texture of
wow.
the wall is in every single room. And they were paying her hundreds of dollars per switch.
Oh, wow.
And so that I kind of see photography, it's definitely going to shrink. I think there's no doubt that the
Mhm.
market is going to shrink, but I tend to look at it as an opportunity for those of us who are doing it and providing something that's very unique and something
Mhm.
that appeals to that kind of a client. I think it's going to be something that will be sort of a status symbol. So
Mhm.
if you're wealthy and you have real photographs, that's going to be a
Yeah,
status symbol in the future. You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
maybe I hope that's what's going to happen. But that's how I tend to look at it in the long term and try to be encouraged about it. So this
Mhm.
is why it's so important for us to make sure we're constantly improving and honing our skills and constantly challenging whatever we did in the last shoot, and positioning ourselves to work with those higher end clients, because
Mhm.
I do already. I think people who are serving, say, a realtor who wants to spend $50 or $99 on a
Mhm.
headshot, they're probably losing business already. But that, for me
Mhm.
personally, I don't get those clients anyway. So
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? If I can add a couple of things to this, because, like you described this pretty well, but I also think, because I've been really digging into this AI lately, right?
right,
And I've been trying to utilize on so many different levels, starting with Photoshop to, Chat GPT and all this, stuff. And I think, for the long run, I think photographers, they don't realize how they can adopt to this, right? And don't, like, I remember, and I don't know if this is a good comparison because there was like completely different times and completely, different things, when the digital was introduced. And I remember all those, kicking and screaming photographers like, oh, film's never gonna go away. This is gonna
yeah,
stay forever, which is still around, but I think there's a lot of people who have really hard time to adopt to new things and they
mhm,
scared to try new things. But in my opinion, this whole AI can definitely help us to, take our photography to the next level. I know this whole thing is fairly new. We're still learning. I think we're still at the kind of at the level where, we kind of like walking into darkness.
right,
But so far, I think, this whole thing can really elevate everything what we do, right? Even like another example, what I would like to kind of share is, all this, I started playing with the backgrounds, switching the
right,
backgrounds, and I know, it's still far from perfect, right? It still needs a lot of work on, the AI. I think learn how to deal with some of those stuff. But that can also be kind of something which be inspirational for us, right? Something which we can learn from it. We can get some ideas, we can get some concepts, we can start looking at things differently. So as you said, like, it's important to be optimistic in one hand, and I also deeply believe that, people have to try it before they're gonna start, kind of putting some opinions. And I agree with you. Like, I think the most important thing at this point is to start adopting to this. And as you said, this is not going away. So people can scream and kick and whatever. This is not going away. And as you also said, it's gonna influence every industry. Because I've seen on so many different, and whoever I'm talking to these days, every business is looking into this, right? So the earlier you adopt to this, the earlier you figured it out, or you earlier start using it, you're always going to be ahead, right? So I agree with you 100%. So what's like, because I know you're much deeper into the headshot industry because you are on Peter Hurley crew. What kind of feedback you getting from that community? Is this is something where people are excited or more fear or they're freaking out? What's your kind of feedback you're getting?
Well, I think that it's similar to what I described from the
Mhm,
crew in general, because people there, well, we tend to be optimistic. You know,
mhm,
Peter's the ultimate optimist, and he's always looking at the bright side of things, and he's always making opportunities. Plus, because the whole sort of crux of the headshot crew, besides being, you know, becoming amazing photographers and upping the level of our skills, a lot of what Peter teaches is about connecting with people.
mhm,
And so, you know, I firmly believe that obviously AI, at least for now,
mhm,
cannot connect with people on the way that you
no,
or I can. Now that
mhm,
actually might change in the future, but there's a dystopian future I don't want to think about,
yeah,
when the AI becomes that, you know, Commander Data advanced from Star
yeah,
Trek and is walking around with us. But I think that the if you're providing that the service, it's not just about the photos. My clients, when they review me, when they write a Google review, when they talk to me about their headshots and portraits, sure, they love the photos, they're happy with them, but they're always talking about the experience. And I think that focusing on the human element now is more important than ever. But
mhm,
that tends to be the sort of position of the crew, and also the same, that, you know, the cream is going to rise to the top, and then if you're not really providing that high level of service and that high level of product,
mhm,
then you should be worried more than someone who is. The other thing I'll say with AI, this is all very conditional on the type of photography you do.
mhm,
For instance, I would first of all, I would also be very worried right now if my main source of income was retouching, because I think within probably a year that's going to be at the point where the AI is going to, you know, be right there with the best
mhm,
of the human retouchers. That seems like that road is going to be, or that bridge is going to be, you know, crossed
mhm.
sooner. And then,
I would argue with this a little bit, and we can
okay,
have like a little bit discussion because I've been, and again, I'm not, I'm like I'm saying the AI retouching is getting better, right? And
yeah,
I'm using some plugins, I'm using
hmm,
some, but it's still, in my opinion, far from perfect.
right,
You
right,
know, it's if you're looking for some basic retouching adjustments, then yes. But then whenever you start getting into some deeper stuff,
hmm,
then it's I think still it's not there yet. Also, I've noticed that AI missing a lot of stuff and getting confused,
right,
especially and I've done like a little short video about it the other day, where you know as soon as well whenever the image is lit properly and it's fantastic, right? Like all those bright areas, they can be really easy, I would say, recognized by AI and retouch. But as soon as you're getting into some shadowy things, whenever you start having, you know, hands or you know some stuff which it's kind of confusing for AI, this whole thing's turning into a mess. So like
that's
as you
good
said,
to
it's
know. It's good to hear, actually.
yeah, absolutely. And you know what, even like what I would say propose to a lot of photographers. You know, whenever AI, let's say, do things, where like analyze the image, like really analyze the image, and start using all those additional things which you can see, you know, how AI performed. Like so, for example, I think the best one would be the dodge and burn, right? We always
Hmm.
use that. I don't know. I'm sure you do that as well, or
Yep.
frequency separation,
Hmm.
and you just testing the image on black and white filter, right? So you just
Right.
turn the image into the black and white, and you can really clearly see which areas are covered, which ones you need to adjustment. And I start doing this, and then you know what? Again, misses so many things, right? It's getting kind of the overall look good, but when you wanted this high end deep retouching,
Right.
where especially with older folks who, like the skin is not perfect,
Mhm.
then it's, I'm not saying turning into the mess, but what I'm saying is it's still really far from perfect.
You know,
um
that goes back to Rafal to doing, being at that high level of whatever you're doing.
mhm,
So that's good to know, because that's the part that I think is moving more rapidly. But you also bring up another very good point. And I did a video recently where I talked about, is it lighting in the studio, or is it lighting made in Photoshop, right? Because
mhm,
there's obviously a difference, and now we have more and more filters and everything to fix, quote unquote, fix
yeah,
lighting. And the thing that I've noticed is, and which I also, I know to be true, you can't polish a turd, right? So
yeah,
if your lighting isn't good, if you're not lighting people properly, if you're not nailing the light when you take the photo, I don't know what anything can do about that. Like, perhaps in the future, but right now, if you don't have a good raw image coming out of your camera, then you're not going to be able to fix that. So I think a lot of maybe less experienced photographers might think that the AI is a way around being able to really understand how light affects a face and how to properly light people, and it most certainly is not. And I know, I'm sure the same for you, but for me, I would say 90% of the work is done when I snap the shutter, right? So
mhm,
whatever I'm doing in my studio, 90% of the final image is there. Now, that other 10% that you do in post is very important, especially for me, when I do my portraits, I like to color grade, and I like to, enhance it in that way. But the lighting, when it comes to the actual way I light a photo, it's actually 99% of it is done when I hit the shutter. So that's an interesting part too of the
yeah.
whole AI conversation.
Absolutely. But also, if I can add one more thing to
Sure.
this, and then this is actually what you said, but I just want to really point this out, that even if you want to use AI to enhance your images, you have to have good starting point image,
Right.
right?
Right.
You cannot just start, as you said, like from crap, and then all of a sudden you're trying to turn it into some kind of magic. It's
Right.
not going to happen. Um, and I think a lot of people miss that. And like I'm not, and also I don't want to say that people are lazy, but what I'm trying to say that we tend to do a lot of shortcuts, and we like to do shortcuts where you can, oh, you know what, how I can get there without work. But
Hmm.
also with AI, being implemented, and then this is also what you mentioned. You have to understand how this whole retouching process looks like, and you have to understand it, right? Because if you're not going to have the basic understanding about how the retouching process look like, what to focus on, what to fix, what makes the image polished and looks good. And I think the best example even is color grading, right? Like every photographer has kind of own way of color grading their images, and that's what kind of gives the style. And AI cannot do that at this point. I think it's just the basic stuff, and you really want to do this little bit higher level of retouching. AI is not there. I'm just kind of worrying. I'm
Yeah.
just not worrying. I'm just kind of curious if it's even going to be able to get there, right? Because everyone sees images differently, right? Every photographer has own little touch to own image, and AI, I think, is just combining all of it and just throwing average stuff, right?
Right.
So that's something which is interesting in my opinion. And as you said, maybe every photographer is going to have this own style, that's why people are going to be coming to you, right? it's
Hmm.
it's not for the average stuff. They're going to try to come to you and work with you for something a little bit more unique, something different. And that's also kind of brought me to the main point I want to make, right? Like you remember, if you look back in the history, only the rich people were allowed to have these painters who just paint those,
Hmm.
amazing paintings of them or portraits, whatever. I think that's also what might happen. that there will be shrink of photographers, but those ones who's gonna stay on the market is going to be very, very high end photographers who really know the skills. They know how to light, they know how to properly retouch, and they're going to create this amazing experience. And
Right.
that's what's going to, even I deeply believe, might even bring the value of what we do, right? Because if
Mhm.
there will be shortage of photographers, like back in the days, right, there was like one photographer in the city, or whatever, there was like a really limited amount of them because they had to really understand this whole thing. Because and now we're kind of doing this whole circle, in my opinion, that this is going to be completely different era for us.
That's exactly how I see it. And I like to look at it that way, like I said, because that's an optimistic way of looking at it. If you've really put in the time and the energy to hone your skills and get it to that level. But I see opportunity for myself,
Hmm.
and I'm doing everything I can as far as, continuing to learn, continuing to become, I want to be the best of what I do. I want to be the best in my market, in my area,
Hmm.
and positioning myself so as the market does shrink, the people who value what we do, who are already finding us, like my clients, they find me because they value what I do. So the price is not what they're looking at. Price is secondary to the
Hmm.
value. And those kind of clients I think will always have. The last thing that I've thought about that I want to mention with AI is the problem with AI for a photo of an actual person is it's not a photo of an actual person. So everything that I've seen, obviously, it's not an actual photo, but everything
Hmm.
I've seen always looks sort of dead in the eyes.
Hmm.
And I don't know how a computer will ever be able to truly replicate the moment in time that we push the shutter where you have a person conveying a genuine emotion. And so I
Yes.
think that's going to be something else that really preserves what we do. And
Hmm.
for me, I love getting people, obviously with headshots, you want people to look happy, you
Hmm.
want them to look confident, you want them to exude confidence, and I love doing that. But when I do my portrait work, I have a completely different approach. And there's times where, I want people to be comfortable enough to convey a genuine emotion. And it might not be uh, happiness, it might be pensive, it might be even thoughtful, or whatever the emotion is. It doesn't have to be exactly. For me personally, when I do my portrait work, I have a very different goal. And I want it to contrast what my headshots do. So there's only one way that I see you can really capture that moment authentically, and that's with a photographer
Hmm.
interacting with a human. So I like to look at it that way too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one more element I would like to add, because I think my our brains are just kind of on the spin right now.
Yeah.
um I also want to add to this, which also is fascinating, especially I think that is really, you can really see that in headshot photography. So as you probably know, we always try to capture this, like as you said, this specific moment, this specific face expression. There's something about it that most of us even don't understand, really, right? Because you go through sets of images which you shot, and there's, let's say, one image, for whatever reasons your gut is telling you like, oh my god, there's something about it, right? And I also think, well, not think, but apparently this is a little bit kind of, we're going to just dive a little bit deeper into psychology. But we have this tendency to do those microphase expressions, and apparently there's thousands and thousands and thousands of them, which we're throwing between those. Just I don't know, there's 20 something those like regular face expressions, and there's thousands of those micro face expressions, and those ones are picked up by our subconscious. So we really don't understand. We just kind of, I'm sure everyone has this experience that you talk to someone and all of a sudden you just like, what, even the person is nice, or you have this good conversation, but you're not feeling right about that person. And sometimes, you just met someone and you just click right away, right?
Right.
And that's where we just picking up all those micro phase expressions, and that's how we can read people. And I think, I don't know, as you said, if AI, at least at this point, will be able to really create those, right? um because it's just sometimes it's just like even different muscles, right, in this human face can change, or I don't know, get relaxed or whatever, and all of a sudden the image has completely different feel. And I 100% agree with you that AI, like I don't know if this is a good comparison, but it's, for me it's kind of like doesn't have a soul. So
Right.
we really see through so many those little elements, and we can really recognize in our subconscious can really pick so many different things that AI simply don't understand that at this point.
Yes, 100%. I agree. And it's that old saying, right? The eyes are the window to the soul. And not having a genuine capture of that just doesn't look like right to me. And you're right, there's all those face muscles and those little tiny micro expressions, as you say, make a major difference in the final image, the impact it has, the way people respond to it. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? But that's again, it's a completely different level of understanding, because I think we sometimes we look at this whole thing like a, for the short run, right? Like, oh my God, this image looks kind of cool. I put as a thumbnail or whatever, you really don't see it. But everyone who's a headshot photographer for at least few years, we know there's so much into this. It's just the lighting, it's the person mood, it's your mood. It's the time of the day, it's how the person is tired, and then if it's tired or it's relaxed or had a there's so much, right? Like this complexity is just beyond belief sometimes. And when I started working in this industry, I always thought it's just a good camera and good lighting. That's all what it is. And then you had this everything kind of set up, and you I'm sure you had those sessions where just like, shit, there's something didn't went well, I don't understand what it was. But then you start kind of exploring that this whole headshot, there's so many layers which we have to go through. It's crazy. So why
Yeah,
don't we, maybe I don't want to wrap this up right this point, but I have actually another question to you,
sure.
and I'm going to just go into different direction a little bit,
Okay.
because you are also a musician, right?
Right.
And how this whole thing, and I don't want to just go deep into this, but I just want to kind of find some connection and some similarities with the music industry, because we also know that AI takes over. I actually had this meeting with a friend of mine who's a pianist, and he's a little bit older, like he's really kind of pronounced, like not pronounced, he's really well known pianist in the world. And he's got a daughter who is 18, and he says to me, like, man, the stuff what she does with AI, with all this digital, like, I don't even get it. And it sounds good, looks good, so he's like, he didn't say he's terrified of what he does, but he's like, we entering completely different, I would say, era, where we're going to be looking at all this artistic kind of skills from completely different level. So how this whole thing, because I'm sure you're also really deep into the music industry, do you see that also people freaking out over there, or they more optimistic, how that industry kind of feels about it?
I think it depends on what you do
Okay.
in the industry as well. So just like it depends on what kind of a photographer you are. Like for instance, I mean, the thing I think that's the scariest. It's just like what all the actors are dealing with, right?
Yeah,
Because eventually they're already talking about, well, we can just have an AI version of an actor, and I think we're going to have AI pop stars. They're already having some AI online influencers and all
that's
that.
crazy.
I
Yeah.
know, I know,
That's,
and it's like some people don't know if it's a real person or not.
mhm.
So all of these industries are going to be, profoundly affected in one way or another. If I was a musician doing production, that's where I would be, again, probably a little
Freaking.
bit more concerned, because it's going to get to the point where you're probably going to be able to have AI score a movie, right?
Mhm.
Or AI score a video game, or write a commercial jingle. I mean, this is something the music industry has been dealing with for a long time, though. And like, if you think about back in the old days, um, jazz musicians, when canned, they called it canned music, when record players started coming out and people were able to purchase music and play it out of a machine,
Hmm.
then it started to really affect the live music. So I don't know where it's going. I can tell you, for me, in my music career as a jazz musician, it's niche, and so again, I think there's always going to be a place for it. And
Hmm.
jazz is also another example where there's a very few at the top who are doing extremely well for themselves, but then there's very many in the middle who are doing okay, and then very many at the bottom who really are just kind of day to day trying to get by. So these are all things we should definitely think about. I can tell you that my music career and my train, because all of my formal training is in music. I have 3 degrees in music. So everything I did, I studied jazz, I studied classical music. That's what I did all throughout school. And uh, I and performed and I toured and I taught a lot and I still do teach.
Hmm.
But I feel like the what I learned from music is the always being creative, always pursuing that next thing. Because when you're a musician, you never wake up one day and say, "Oh, I've arrived. I've made
Hmm.
it. I'm the best."
But I think it applies to everything, right?
Yeah,
Every artistic field, like even
definitely.
photography. If you say you've done it, that means you're done, right?
Right, right. So you have to, it's this balance between thinking you're great at it, but also knowing you suck at it, and and kind of
You
balancing
can
every
balance
day.
it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that, I think the music has influenced me a lot. And then I had a friend tell me when I was early in my career with my headshot business, it was one of my clients, and I told him I'm a musician, and he said all the best photographers I know are musicians. And then I just thought nothing of it. And now a few years later, I
Mhm.
have so many people I've met who are photographers and they're musicians too. So it's definitely that creative, that need for creating, and that what
Yeah,
we get out of being creative is definitely that common theme. Um,
absolutely.
I think the challenges are the same. The challenges are there's a machine that's basically doing now and trying to do what we do, so we have to pivot.
Mhm.
But here's the other thing: is if you in the 21st century, I think all of us know that we need like diverse revenue streams, and so this is another thing that's important. I still run a music school, so I still have a separate income stream from
Mhm.
my photography, and so I think that is another key to pretty much everybody, but especially if you're in a creative field like what we do, you have to have multiple streams of revenue. And this way, when one is a little slow, the other one can pick up the slack. So that's something else that I think will kind of AI proof your career, if you will.
Mhm. So yeah, so let's switch the gears and let's talk about a business. 'Cause I
Sure.
think that's a good introduction to what actually I was planning to go. So let's talk how headshot photographers can survive nowadays, right?
Right.
Because um, as we probably know, it's not an easy industry, and I want to be honest with this because I've been hearing a lot of those comments where people are like, "Oh my God, you probably make tons of money, and then you have this luxurious life." And I'm gonna be honest, I don't. It's a hard work like any other business. It's something that you have to constantly work on. You have better months, you have months where it's slower, there's months where it's extremely busy, but you also have to have all those different, as you mentioned, stream of income to
Mhm.
make a living, right? Because it's a constant push and it's a constant hustle, and then you have to be on the top of things 24/7. So let's jump into this. So tell me, if I would like to kind of ask you, what would be your advice to headshot photographers, especially for those ones who are starting off? Because I know they want to focus on the headshots, but what's the other things they can do? And like, I want to really point it out on education because we started a little bit talking about it. So what's the other things they can do to bring that additional stream of income to, make a living out of this? What's
Right.
what's your take on this?
Well, I think first of all, there's a lot of people out there nowadays, and they're saying how easy it is, and you can make all like you just were mentioning. So it's important to know, like, there's no get rich quick scheme when you want to make a viable, long lasting business. So I think the first thing people need to understand is if you want to be successful as a headshot and a portrait photographer, you have to be in it for the long haul. It's not going to be
Yes.
something that's a quick and easy way to make all this money. It's just not the way it works. However, I can tell you that I was able to, turn my hobby, which became, which was a passion even early on. Photography was always a passion. I was involved in the industry in one way or another. But during the pandemic, I turned it into a viable business, and it is doing very well. And there's many facets to it. So if you're just getting started, the first thing that I'd recommend to people just getting started is you need to hone your skills, and you need to be your toughest critic, because people just think, well, oh yeah, I'll just take some headshots and I'll charge a lot of money for it. And it doesn't work that way. The people who are making six figures, a year doing this, for instance, have the skill level that meets the prices that they're charging. And it is possible to do, but I think the place you need to begin is you want to become the best in your market at what you do. So when I started studying headshot photography with Peter Hurley and in the crew, I made it my mission to become the best at it. I made it my mission to, and so that meant I did a ton of test shoots. I did a ton of selfie shoots where I would just set up lights and photograph myself. There was a ton of work involved, but it is possible. I mean, it's so rewarding. So I encourage people to do it, but just know that it's your skill level that you want to really work on. Starting a business. Here's another thing that people I think have a misconception about. And I was talking to one of my friends about this the other day. Like, if you want to start a new business, it doesn't mean you should give your 2-week notice at your current job and do all that. That's not the way it works. The best thing to do is to start it on the side, so that first of all, you want to see if you actually enjoy doing it, because there's people who think they might want to do it, but then you might change your mind. But the other thing is, you want to build your side hustle to the point where it's making enough money that you can make it your main source of revenue if you so desire. That's impossible to do, right? If you haven't done it before, it's very difficult. So I wouldn't recommend just quitting your job and trying to become a headshot photographer. But I would say that you want to start with your skills, getting your skills together. And then for me, as someone who has 20 years of education, the thing that photography taught me is that nothing beats the value of a mentor. So if you have no mentor, if you have not just a mentor who's teaching you, but also a group you're connected with that's constantly holding you accountable, encouraging you, and helping you, it's going to be very difficult to be successful. So I was and am super blessed that I found Peter and the crew, because I studied one-on-one many times with Peter. I've gone to multiple headshot intensives when he does his live events in New York, and other events. And then I even have mentored with other photographers in the crew one-on-one, like Ivan Weiss, who's out of London, who's one of the greatest portrait photographers of our time, in my opinion. And so mentorship is one of the greatest things you can do. And this is where business kind of differs from education. Like, I was at the point when I started my headshot business where I just knew, okay, well, the last thing I'll do is go to school for photography, because that is not gonna get me where I need to be. But then I just decided to mentor one-on-one and go directly to the source. So if there's someone doing what you want to do and they're willing to mentor you, and not just like online photography coaching and all that, that's awesome. But I also have business mentors in completely different industries that I lean on. all the time. And one of my dear friends is in the insurance industry, very successful guy, very successful. And I'm constantly leaning on him, asking his advice and talking with him. It could be as simple as like, let's go get a beer and talk about business. And the inspiration I get out of him and the encouragement and the direction is really, I think, crucial if you want to, you
Mhm.
know, go from nothing. And that's what I did. I had no business, no photography business. I didn't have one client. And within less than 2 years, I brought it to the point where it is making six figures. So
Mhm.
I feel really blessed, but like there was a lot of work, a lot of time, and every day there's a lot of work, a lot of time invested in
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah, it's 24/7 to be honest, right?
Yes, yes,
But
sir.
one thing what I want to add to this, which also is important, right? And I think you pointed out, but I really want to put some spotlight on it. Just because you are a great photographer doesn't mean you're a good businessman. Because I think that's what a
100%.
lot of photographers getting kind of like hit, and they basically getting out of business fairly quickly because they focus way too much on photography. And I'm not saying this is
Right,
the wrong thing to do, because you have to be good at photography in order to be successful, but also you have to be good at business. Just because you're doing great images means absolutely nothing. You have to be able to sell it.
right.
And I think that's the biggest struggle a lot of photographers, because I remember even back in the days where I was shooting weddings, um, like I know I was doing good job, but selling it was another challenge which I had a really hard time to overcome. I was lucky enough because I was working with the right people, and they were helping to push my business.
Right,
But you have to learn how to sell it, how to market, how to brand yourself, how to, getting into certain industries, how to talk to people, how to basically be able to sell your stuff. And that's, I think, is the biggest hassle for a lot of guys, because they don't want to do it, right? Because they
yep,
think, oh, I'm the big shot photographer here, and I'm not going to beg people to, buy my services. And it's takes the courage, and as you said, takes a lot of knowledge, and you have to, if you're able, start getting into this, and read books, get the mentor is a huge thing. And this is also which is kind of interesting for me, because sometimes, like, I'm getting inquiries like, oh, I want you to be my mentor, I want to learn from you. And I ask the first questions about, what their goal is, whatever. And then, they saying, oh, I bought this, like, I don't know, $20,000 equipment, but they chipping off to, pay you whatever, right?
right, right.
So again, I don't want to go to this like money discussion, but it's kind of interesting for me that the education is not much valued
Hmm.
as, equipment. And
Right,
I'm not saying this is like that's the kind of culture we're living in right now. And we have access to all this stuff. That's the coolest thing what people don't understand. You
yeah,
guys, the new generation, people who are starting the business nowadays, you guys have access to everything.
hmm,
Sometimes you have to pay for it. Sometimes, if you're smart enough, you can get it for free.
right,
If you have time and you want to dig into this, but the informations are there. When we are starting off, I'm sure you remember, it was much harder, right, to get anything from people.
yeah,
And I remember even the craziest story. I remember when I started my business, I went to one place and I said to the guy, like, I want to work for free for you. I just wanted to learn from you. Like, and I don't know, I'm gonna sweep the floor. I can just tell me what to do. I can even like clean the bathrooms, but I want to be in this industry, and I want to be in this environment where I can learn.
right.
And the guy just threw me off. He's like, get the hell out of here. I don't
Oh,
want to have nothing to do with you. And I'm just like, oh my
mhm,
God. And now we're living in a completely different world where people are way more open to help you, to share, opinions, share advice, give you a hand, help you. um, but you definitely, people who starting off, they have to have someone who's going to be overlooking, because it's going to help you. Like, there's no question about it. It's going to get you to where you want to be much much quicker, because those people are going to keep you on the right path, and they're gonna correct you. If you're gonna just going sideways, they're gonna like, hey, dude, like, this is the wrong way. I've been there, I've done this, it's not gonna work. You have to go this way, right? So that's something which is important.
100%. And I tweeted the other day something like, photographers will not think twice to spend 10 grand on gear, but then balk at the idea of spending $1,500 for a mentorship with one of the top people in the industry.
Yeah.
And so I mean, like, the money I invested and that I'm still investing in mentoring with people that I aspire to be like and aspire to reach their level of success is the best investment you can make. You're going to get so much more out of that than you will get out of buying that new lens. The lens isn't going to teach you anything. The lens is just a tool. And it's really funny. I think that is a big mentality in our industry. And I'm still doing it though. Like I highly recommend the mentorship. Like I signed up for Felix Kunz's workshop, which is coming up, and I can't wait for that because I know that's going to be something that brings my skills from here to here. It's going to open new doors for me. It's going to make me even better at what I do. So yeah, I highly believe that. And now regarding business, you're totally 100% right, because there's plenty of photographers out there, right? And they're good, but they might not be great at what they do, but they're just killing it and crushing it in business, because being a business person is something that a separate load of skills you need to develop. So for me personally, the recipe that has worked for me that I'm now sharing with people is it's the excellence in what you do as a photographer, right? Because the better you are at what you do, it will open more doors for you. It will lead to higher end clients for sure. But it's also wisdom in business, how to run a business, how to market yourself, how to treat clients, how to price. I mean, all of these strategies that you're only going to learn by having been there and done that. And then it's also, for me, it's a 3-part, formula. The third part is the way your life is, getting your personal life to a place where you're living in a state of, being positive and gratitude. And I can say that it wasn't until I started to align those 3 things that I started to see success in my life. So I've spent a lot of time, especially since the pandemic. I went through a very, very difficult time in my other business where I saw a business I built for 15 years closed, like a lot of other people's businesses. Our revenues dropped more than half within 1 month. Couldn't pay my bills. I lost a building that I had, the facility in. It was the darkest time in my business life, and I was spiraling down, like a lot of people were, into a state of depression and feeling like a failure. And photography, I had been doing a little bit on the side, but not really. And I remember going to my wife and I said to her, "I'm selling all of this photography equipment. We need the money." And this was like, maybe in early 2021. So the pandemic was still going on, but things started to slightly open up. She said, "What, are you crazy? Now's the time where you should be doing the photography. Do it." And so I remember being like, "Okay." And I said to her, "All right, I'll give it one more shot." And I got to the point where I had and I still do, I have a flex kit, which is, the Westcott continuous light system. And I remember putting it up for sale. I was that close to getting rid of everything. And then she told me, now's the time you should try and grow this as a business. And so I said, okay, I'm going to give it one more shot. And then the same day, one of my former students contacted me and he said, "Hey, Pete, I need a new headshot," because I had been doing it a little bit, on the side for friends and for students. And I remember looking at his text and I was about to text him and say, "Hey man, I don't do that anymore." And it was after I had this conversation with my wife, and what she said resonated with me. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, this will be either the last headshot I ever take or the start of a new business, depending on how it goes. Because like my confidence was shattered. I had a space, which is the space I'm in right now, which I couldn't use for our music classes. We were using it for all of our music classes. And so I said to him, "Okay, come on in." And I remember taking these headshots of him and they came out great. He loved them. And then I shared them on my social media. And then Peter Hurley responded and was like, this is a shebanging shot, and that was the catalyst for me really saying, okay, I'm going to do this. So businesses, and I say all of this because business is going to have ups and downs and highs and lows. And I feel like it's important also to, like, I what I've been doing now was birthed out of really the greatest failure that I went through in business.
Mhm.
And so I think that what it taught me and what I had started to do at that point was then realize that my mindset and the way I looked at the world around me and what I thought I was capable of
Mhm.
was the ingredient that I was missing. Because now I was getting my photography skills together. I already knew a lot about business because I'd been in business for 15, 16 years already. But then the mindset of you can never do this, you're not good enough, you don't have the skills or whatever. It wasn't until I really started working on that and changing those thoughts and changing those habitual ideas that I started to see my business grow and take off.
Mhm.
I really do believe it's that you got to deal with your mindset, you got to deal with your emotional life, your spiritual life, your physical life. All of that is important. You have to understand business principles. You definitely want to be always studying, always becoming better at what business is. And then obviously you want to be great at what you do. And the
Mhm.
thing is, your confidence level will grow as your skill levels grow. So I know a lot of photographers struggle with confidence, and I do too. Everyone does to some degree. But when you do it, when you spend the time to hone your skills and understand how light works and understand what looks best on people, even posing and how all this stuff, your confidence level will grow, and that's just going to lead to more success. So I really believe it's all of that together. So I hope that wasn't too much of a tangent, but that's
No, no, no. You know what? I'm glad you're sharing this because I think we all go for that. I don't even know how many times I was trying and I was planning to give up this stuff. I was like, okay, I'm done. And I don't want to do this anymore. And then you have this like a, all out of nowhere, there's someone comes in and like, oh, can you do my headshot? And then you just kind of get back into the groove and you're just like, oh, I got this amazing session, and I got this amazing images, and then your confidence level goes like straight to the roof, and all of a sudden, okay, I'm back into the business. So we all go through, I think, through this like emotional roller coaster. And then and as you said, it's business wise, where like you're getting slower, and then you just like you don't get clients, and you just like, oh my god, like maybe I'm doing something wrong.
right,
And then you get one client, and all of a sudden you just back to like your positivity, and then you just feel better about yourself, and then you just fully kind of recharge and you're ready to go. So I think we all go for that. But the one thing what I want to point it out, which I want to share to people who are watching this, that sometimes I deeply believe we have those extreme situations where you kind of on the edge of collapsing, or kind of getting out of the business. But those are the best lessons we're learning, because I
right,
found whenever I run into those situations where everything was just falling apart, like, oh, you're not getting business, some clients, they don't want to pay you, for example, or there's a million things which can happen. Those are the moments where I was getting the most creative, like how the hell I can get out of this, and how I can make this work, how I can adjust myself. And also, I think when it's the business going too good, sometimes we're getting too lazy, because it's just
right,
like, oh, everything is going well, like, why I would worry about it. But what I want to say, the best stuff what I've done, and the best, the decision adjustments, and then coming up with new ideas, with new concepts, how to approach business differently, was in those like really bad moments. So
mm,
if everyone has those, don't kind of like, I don't know, don't give up. Don't kind of like think, okay, this is over, because there's always ways to get out of this. There's always some solution which gonna help you to solve the problems, get back to you on the track, and treat those moments as a kind of lessons, right? Because that's the best way to approach some of those stuff. I know it's not
yeah,
easy. I know it's, as you said, you have to juggle this emotional state, the financial state, and there's all sorts of different factors. But I always I always believe in that in those moments you learn the most, and then you can just kind of like, okay, now I know. And I think sometimes, we forcing also ourselves to do things which we would never do if we would feel comfortable, right?
Right,
And
right.
that applies also in the music industry. And if you were, let's say, athlete, you learning where you just on the edge of, okay, you know what, there's no more, but there's always something left in you that you can use it to get better, or just kind of fix stuff, right?
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like, we have this mentality in our society where failure is something to be avoided at all costs,
Yeah.
right? But the reality is you learn 10 times more from the failures than you do from a win. Like, I have a big win and I'm like, great, it was a big win, and I move on.
Yeah.
But when I fail at something, when I have a failure, if a client isn't happy, or a failure with dealing with, some aspect of my business, whatever it is, you're going to learn so much more from those failures. And then the next time you're going to be even better at confronting those. So I think that if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to be in business for yourself, you got to learn to embrace the failure and don't let it cripple you, but let it be the catalyst that pushes you forward. And
Absolutely.
I mean, we all know the statistics too. Businesses, I know it's like most businesses fail
Five
after
years Within
five
5 years.
years, right? And then after 10, if you have a business that lasts more than 10 years, it's extremely, extremely rare. So what's the difference between the people who run the businesses that succeed and the ones that fail? Well, there's a lot of differences probably, but I think the one of the main underlying differences is they just refuse to give up.
Mhm.
So if you refuse to give up, if you refuse to throw in the towel, I mean, that's a recipe, I think, for success in anything in life. And
Mhm.
that's something that you study any person in history who has achieved anything of greatness, and they failed miserably many, many times along the way. It wasn't just like, an upward angle. It was a tough haul for them. So
Yeah.
embracing that and learning from your mistakes and learning from your failure, if you do that, then that's the best way, and you're going to learn so much. You're going to grow from it. So it's all about
True.
growing. Same thing with being a photographer. Like, you light someone wrong, and the best way to learn how to light them well is to see and do it wrong, and then you say, "Oh,
Yeah.
this light doesn't look good."
That's the way it is.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. And the beauty of digital is obviously you see the results right away. So the learning curve is a lot less steep than when it was in the old days, when you would have to wait to develop the film and then remember how you had it set up and all of this. So I think, like you said, for younger people getting into it, the beauty of digital is that you have that instant feedback, so you can really tweak it. And
Mhm.
I know for me personally, I'm doing mostly constant light right now, so I can see it right away, which
Yeah.
is also awesome. And I really enjoy working with constant light for that and other reasons. But
Yeah. So we're gonna jump into this constant light for a
yeah,
few minutes because that's another, I think, interesting topic. But I want to just bring one more statistic, which I actually read recently about Japan, and apparently Japan has one of the longest run for businesses. So say, let's say there's 4 or 5 generations. Sometimes they're running the same business. And from one hand I was just like, that's just crazy, right? So they have like, generation after generations, and they just running the same thing. And I was just like, from one hand extremely fascinating, but from the other hand I'm just like looking at, as you said, people just throw the towels as long as they get the first mistake, or they have some little issue, and like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm giving up, this is not for me, whatever, right?
right,
But I think people have to understand that, and this is extremely important. What I'm gonna say right now is the fact that this is the long run. It's a marathon. Like, if you planning get into photography and you want to be successful, I know we have access to all this informations and access to the knowledge and stuff, but in order to be successful, you have to like I'm not saying dedicated the whole life, but the big chunk of your life in order to be successful. And it's not, there's no way you can be successful overnight. There's no way in hell, because there's so much involved that, it takes a lot of, even, what, I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I can see like, oh my God, there's so much still to learn, and there's still another layers of this whole thing that, I would like to learn and kind of understand better, and then be able to apply this into my business, my photography. So yeah, if you're planning to get into this, and you're planning to do this for a few years and make tons of money, yeah, I wish you good luck. And if you do that, I am going to be your student. There's no question about it.
Well, that's so true. And all those overnight, quote, overnight successes that we hear about, when you read about them and you read the life they actually lived until that moment where you see them up and, as a success, they worked their butts off like crazy for
Hmm.
years. It's funny you say that about the Japanese businesses. So my older brother, James, is actually fourth generation in our family business, which
Hmm.
my father's father's father started
Wow.
in Manhattan as an immigrant from Ellis Island, from Italy, started a metal manufacturing business. And my brother James took the mantle in that business with my father, and he's still running it, fourth generation. And one thing
Wow.
I can tell you, growing up with a dad who was an entrepreneur and who ran his own business, there were so many times where he struggled. Where I remember there were times where I would hear him talking with my mom as a kid and discussing like how hard it is and the tough things that were going on in business. So I think that experience also shaped me, because the one thing he never did was he never gave up. He never gave up. And there were times where it was on the brink, and he had to evolve constantly too.
Hmm.
So that's the other thing. Like, you want to have a long lasting business. It's not, well, I've come up with a great idea, I opened the business, and now I just sit here and wait for the money to come in. No, you're constantly evolving, and you're constantly growing, and you're constantly looking at what's happening around you. Like for us,
Hmm.
AI, for instance, and you're strategizing. Well, how am I going to weather the possible storm, and what am I going to do to continue growing my business, and how can I maybe do something that someone else is not thinking of doing. And so growing up in that kind of an atmosphere also, I think, really shaped me, because it just taught me never to give up. Like I just refused to give up.
Hmm.
And I think every successful business owner, entrepreneur, they never gave up. They just don't. You refuse to do it. It doesn't mean you keep doing the same thing and hoping for different results. It means you keep moving forward and figuring it out as you
Yeah.
go. I think that's another thing that scares people about starting anything, but especially starting a business, is that it's that fear of failing at it.
Hmm.
But and also feeling like, well, I have to have everything completely figured out, 100%, 500-page business plan before I start. And that is like, if you have that mentality, you're never going to do anything with your life, right? You
Hmm.
have to start somewhere. So that's another thing I learned. Actually, I learned this lesson when I started my YouTube channel, which I had no goal for starting this channel outside of, I just want to become better at making videos. Like, I just wanted to become
Hmm.
better at video, so it could be something I could offer to clients. And I didn't know what I was doing at all. And I just started posting videos. But then over time, the goal of what I like to talk about, and what I want the channel to be about, and all this, it became clear over time. So I think that a lot of people who are listening, and they want to start something new, they want to start a photography business, I think you just got to jump into it, and you do your best to learn, but you learn as you go. And you're not, I wasn't sure. I had no idea where I'd be right here talking to you, that I'd have my business the way it is right now, and have the things happening the way they are right now. I couldn't have imagined that. But I just was kind of embracing the process. I made sure that I every day doing something, growing, embracing the process, trying new things. And that I think is a much healthier way to go about being in business and go about, and it doesn't mean you just foolishly do things. You want to be wise and research and all of that. But it comes to that point where you just got to start, just do it, do something, stop sitting on the sidelines.
Absolutely. And you know what? I don't want to sound bad, but I think I know a lot of people, and I agree with you, because I've been getting also those messages and emails, and people like, oh, what would be your business plan? I'm like, you know what? They're so hard to create business plan because there's so many unknowns that, if you create a business plan and you start kind of executing, the business plan is going to change million times over
Right.
throughout this entire process. Because I think the biggest misconception most of the time is that people think that this is going to work, and they have this deep belief, but 9 out of 10 is not going to work, right? And
Yep.
then you have to adopt to this, you have to change it. But I think that's what is important, that you might have some kind of basic idea or some basic structure, but you have to be open that, okay, if this is not going to work, I'm going to switch it right away and then try to adjust it and just move forward. But
100%.
yeah, and then and especially like with this extremely quickly evolving industry where everything is just changing on the daily basis, creating any business plan, it's like, I'm not saying that it's not the right thing to do, but I think I wouldn't spend too much time doing this. I would just have the basic stuff and then just throw that into the market and see what's going to happen, and what we can do. Because as I know, like, oh, I need a 2 years, 5 years business plan. I'm like, it's all nonsense. And again, it's kind of fascinating because the theory and the kind of the practical side of the story, they never gonna align. Like, they might just kind of like touch each other once in a while, but most of the time, things sometimes works completely different way than we expected.
So what I do is I write a list of short and long-term goals.
Hmm.
So my business plan is basically a list of goals that I want to accomplish over certain amounts of time. And I do believe I think you should write a business plan, even if it's a simple one, right? It doesn't have to be something, like I said, a 500-page, like we're going to figure out every single thing, because you're totally right. It's going to evolve as you go. But I think having kind of a clear set of goals that
Yes.
you want to accomplish is highly important. And then it's so important to revisit those goals, 1 month, 2 month, 6 month, 1 year down the line, because you'll be shocked at the ones that you do accomplish. And there will be ones you don't accomplish. But when you have a physical representation of where you've been and where you're going, it makes it so much easier to gauge what you're doing in your life. And this is why I also journal. So I have a journal. I don't write in it every day. I should, but I write in it often. And I got to tell you, when I go back and I read what I wrote a year ago, it has a profound impact on me, because first of all, it reminds me that, well, the guy a year ago would have been like, never thought that you would be here a year later. So it's very encouraging in a way, but it also provides perspective that, because we're only looking at the present and we're only thinking about the past, usually in a bad way.
Mhm.
But
That's true.
yeah, it's so true, right? But when you have that perspective of, well, the past, first of all, we're looking at, sometimes we look at the past and we look at the negatives, but we also at the same time look at it with this weird sort of nostalgia. It's like, oh, I miss, like I look back on working at the local camera store in college, and I have nostalgia towards it. But when I was there doing it, I hated it. I was a young kid. I wanted to be out playing my bass. So
Yeah.
I think having a long-term perspective and really thinking about all of that is important too. And then we look at the future and we look at it with fear. And you're you're not, all of those things that I was afraid of, some of them did happen to me. I will be honest with you, with business. Now it was a global pandemic happened, so that was kind of a wild card. But most of the things that we're afraid of are not going to happen. So,
Mhm.
but I do believe you should have a clear list of goals. You should have intent in what you do, because that will inform your daily goals too. And your daily, what, like the things that I do every day are things that I do because I want to be here 6 months from now, or here
Mhm.
a year from now, and there's things that I want to accomplish. So you want to have those goals, but it is important to just think about it, develop it, get yourself in gear, and then just do it. You got to just do it, because you're
Exactly.
totally right. It's going to change as you go. Many of the things that I thought I'd be doing, I'm not doing. I mean, I thought right now I'd be a jazz musician. So my goals changed. I mean, I still am. It's not like you don't become a jazz musician, but I thought I would be doing that every day and every night playing jazz. So
Yeah.
things will change. You gotta you
Yeah.
gotta be able to ebb and flow with it, I think.
Yeah. I don't know who said that, but I've heard this. I don't know, it was either Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. I'm not sure. One of those. And he says some interesting quote that most of the time we were worried about the things which we didn't do, not the things which we've done.
Right.
We way kind of contemplate on things which we didn't do. And I think that's
Right.
it's a good statement, because we work hard, and I think we do a lot of things, but I'm sure sometimes the things which we could do or we didn't do, that's the things which kind of eats us alive a little bit.
Yeah.
So
And
okay,
you
so let's switch into the technical stuff,
okay,
and then
cool.
the last thing, let's a little bit talk about equipment, because I know a lot of people want to hear that stuff. I just want to point out, because there's a bunch of people looking at the podcast. If you
Cool.
guys have any questions, any something you want to add to what we're talking about, or there's any specific things you would like to ask Pete or me, I'll be more than happy to take those questions. um I don't know if the questions can came in from Facebook, because we on the YouTube and Facebook. But I don't see any comments, so I'm not sure if the comments going through. I know they should come from YouTube. So if you're on the YouTube and you have questions, yeah, feel free to ask. We'll be more than happy to take those. But now let's jump and talk a little bit about lighting, because it's also a little bit of revolution when it comes to the LED lighting,
Hmm.
um, and constant lighting. I actually, just to kind of give you a little bit of information on my end, I was approached by a company, which basically specialize in LED constant lighting, and then send me some equipment, which I was kind of shocked that they've done this. But also at the same time, I'm extremely appreciated that they've done it, because that allowed me to look at it at constant lighting from completely different perspective. I started using it. At the beginning, I was just like, hey, let's see how this is gonna go. But now I'm kind of excited, and really, I haven't well, the thing what I want to say, I haven't seen a lot of things which I should see, and I didn't predict some of those things. So because I mean, know you using the constant lighting as well.
Yep.
Let's kind of have a discussion about it, because I think this is important. People I know always ask about lighting, what lighting you're using, and why you're using this. So what's your take on it? And then maybe we can start kind of also unpacking this a little bit.
Sure. Well, I use a Westcott Flex kit.
Hmm.
Again, my mentor was Peter Hurley, so that's what I use for all of my headshots
Hmm.
primarily. And there's a lot to love about it. The light is beautiful, the quality of the light, the way that, again, seeing the light right away and being able to shape it the way you like it is, I think, the biggest benefit of using constant light. There's obviously limitations to it, but I think over the past year or two, there's all these new lights coming out where they're getting better and better and more powerful. And I think a lot of the limitations that were there in the past
Hmm.
are being addressed. Having said that, I still do use strobe. I think that there's situations that call for using strobe.
Hmm.
Uh, But in my studio, 99% of the time, I'm using the Flex Kit, or I'm using, I have Nan Light that I use for portrait work, and then some other kinds of continuous light gadgets and stuff like that. So that I love it, because I don't just love the fact that I can see it and shape it the way I like, right in camera, which is nice, or right, in real life. I like the quality of it. And I know some people don't like the quality of the continuous light, but I find that it has a sort of creaminess, I don't know if that's the right word, to it. And when I take portraits, I love shooting wide open, which I know is a big no-no for a lot of people. But like, I will take a 1.4 lens and I will shoot portraits at 1.4. I love it. I love the look of it. It's just my personal opinion. And I think that the constant light, the way it looks with wide open shooting is a very nice effect. It works well for the kind of shooting I do, and for the way that my images turn out. So I think it's great. The challenge is sometimes when you're doing it for headshots, is some people's eyes are sensitive to it, but there's ways to kind of get around that. But most of the time I have nothing but praise for using constant light. I really think it's it's the way things will probably go.
Absolutely. So I want to add, and I want to just look at it from completely different angle, because that's something which I don't think is discussed as often as it should be. But I want to just talk about constant lighting from the client perspective, because that was the biggest shift
Right.
for me. And like, I'm not saying that the strobe whatever is a bad thing. I know if I would say something, people would just, I would say, eat me alive, because that's how we shoot for decades and decades and decades. But I've noticed with the constant lighting, my clients have completely different experience, and it takes a little bit of time for them to get used to it, because those lights are powerful, and then you have this constant, they have to be in this like environment where there's a lot of light coming in at them. But after I found 5-10 minutes, when they get used to it, they have completely different experience.
Hmm.
With the flash going off, every, I don't know, 2, 3, 5 seconds, whatever. I've noticed that not a lot of my clients, but some clients, they felt uncomfortable, and they were just blinking. Then we're just like, you could see the face is reacting to this, right? And as soon as I start shooting constant lighting, this whole thing just literally went away.
Right.
And I started asking them about those stuff, right? How did you feel after the shoot? And how did the lighting is bugging you, or it was okay? And like, no, they like, at the beginning was kind of hard, but then after a while I got used to it, and then I
Right.
love it, right? And I think, and I know I'm just kind of repeating myself, but with the strobe, people kind of get this nervousness, right? Before the flash goes off, and they just like constantly tense.
Yep.
Again, with the constant lighting, this whole thing kind of goes away. So that was just my first um, impression, that I'm just like, I never even thought about it. There was something which was completely out of my scope of even like putting this in my brain. But after several sessions, I've noticed this huge difference. So everyone who is watching it, and then you guys still using strobe, I'm not saying you should switch it, but this is one of the elements which really is crucial from the client perspective. So that's something I really want to point it out, because not too many people, I think, talk about it, but we have to look on both ends, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think also if you're using a new mirrorless camera with a very quiet shutter, then they don't even know, that you could be taking their photo, and they don't really know the exact moment the shutter is
Yeah.
firing. So it's very easy for them to, once they get used to it. And it's the only time I have people who need to get used to it is if I'm using 3 lights and I'm doing like a 3 light setup that I learned from Peter, which is a little bright inside of there. Most people have no trouble with it though. But you're totally right. It takes away that element of this flash going off, and then how many of those flashes? Then they have the confirmation beep. So you have flash beep beep, flash beep beep, flash beep beep. It's like it tends to be jarring for people for sure. And
Yeah.
this, you're totally eliminating that. And then you can use whatever shutter speed you want too. So I find
Mhm.
that very beneficial when I do my portrait work and I do want to shoot wide open. I could shoot at 500th of a second, doesn't matter because I don't have to worry about a flash. So I like the flexibility in that sense too. And then the other thing, which you've probably noticed working with the constant lights too, is you don't have to put the power very high. Like if you get a good light, I
Yeah.
mean, I never put any of my lights above the highest I'll ever put. My flex kit is 40%, and my nan light that I use for a lot of portrait work, I'll put it either in an octabox usually. Probably 25-30% is the highest I go with it. So they don't need to be set incredibly high to get the results that you want, which is really cool. So it's not like it's blinding people or anything.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm using the non-lights. Yeah. So yeah, I never went above 50%. And another thing, what I really also liked about them, you can really precisely set up your white balance because you can adjust it in the
Right.
camera, and you can also adjust it in the lights where you can specifically tweak it a little bit. I've noticed, was a little bit off, right? Like when I set up, for example, my wide balance to 5,000 Kelvin for
Yeah.
example, and then I set up 5,000 Kelvin on my LED lights, it was off. So
Right.
it's not still, you still need to kind of find it, the perfect balance. But as soon as you figure it out, yeah, you get this like spot on white balance without all this, cards and all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So,
And
so that's something.
yeah, you have to figure that out depending on like that, what your camera brand is and all of that.
Yep.
Like for me, using Fuji cameras, I have my white balance in the camera set to
Okay.
between 46 and 4800, but then
Hmm.
I have the lights set to daylight. So
Okay.
and that tends to give me, and part of that is also what your personal look is going to be, right? So there's that leeway. Like some photographers lean towards slightly warmer tones. I tend to lean towards slightly cooler tones in my work. So it depends a little bit on what you want out of your images and where you want to be. But again, that all goes back to knowing. You got to know light. You got to know color too, which is another
Yes.
thing that takes a bit of time to learn good color from bad color, right? Like looking
Mhm.
at the colors in an image and knowing that it's off, or knowing that the skin tones look off, or all of that. So a lot of that is again just learning the fundamentals of photography, which never go away. All those fundamentals.
Absolutely, and I 100% agree with you. In order to, even I know I'm going back to the AI.
Yeah,
You can depend on it all you want, but if you don't know the basics, you don't
right,
understand, some of those things. There's no way you can kind of hit certain, I would say, level of your work without having that knowledge, right?
right,
And then that's something what I just want to point it out to everybody, that don't depend on AI too much. You have to learn the craft from the basics, from the scratch, and then you can really start kind of using AI to helping you to take this to the next level.
right,
But that's something what a lot of people I think forget, because they want to do this quick shortcut, and like, okay, I'm gonna depend on it, but that's not the way to go. Okay, so I think we're gonna slowly wrap it up, because we hour and a half,
oh
and
wow,
yeah, believe it or not. So
I went fast.
yeah, that went really quick. But what I want to say, first of all, thank you for joining. I think you know what, we should do this more often, because this
Yeah,
conversation was pretty cool, and I think we touch so many different topics, which I think people are interested to listen to. There's no questions, and I don't know if there's something on my end which doesn't work, or I will figure out probably later.
okay,
But there's no question, so we're not gonna take any. But yeah, thank you for the chat. Maybe we can schedule, I don't know, once a month, like a little discussion, and then we can kind of uh, touch more topics, because I know we could talk probably for hours and hours without any
definitely,
problem. Yeah, and yeah, let's keep in touch. Maybe you can share a little bit information, because I know we spoke a little bit beforehand, that you have a new group on your Facebook page, where you're going to be teaching and helping people with headshot photography. I will be more than happy to support that,
Thank you.
whatever I can, because we need more educators, because there's not too many. If you look at it, there's there's not too many people who teach headshots.
Yeah.
So maybe that's, I'm sure it's going to be great, great source of information, especially for someone who's as experienced as you are.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I started for now, it's just a Facebook mentoring group. I'm looking to grow it from there. But for now, it's just me helping people become better
Okay.
at headshots. And the focus is headshots and portraiture too,
Okay.
because I look at those in two very different ways.
Hmm.
And as I mentioned before, the focus of my group is those three, kind of that three-pronged approach that worked for me. So becoming great at what you do as a photographer, and
Hmm.
then learning business, and also life skills, because you need all three. So yeah, it would be great. Anyone who wants to join that, you just search for Pete Coco's Headshot and Portrait
Hmm.
Mentoring Group on Facebook. They can
Okay.
find me. And then my YouTube channel, if people are interested in following that, is just Pete Coco Photography. And then I'm Pete Coco, Pete Coco Photography on YouTube. And then on Twitter and Instagram, it's just at Pete Coco Photo. And my YouTube page is mostly about Fuji gear. So if you love
Okay.
Fuji, you're gonna love my page. But I do a lot of different stuff in there, and there are a lot of headshot related videos as well.
Perfect. Awesome. Perfect. Thank you for chatting with me. I know it's Monday, so it's going to be probably interesting week. We just getting into the groove, I guess, right?
Yeah,
Like all of us. Yeah, and then yeah, let's do this again
definitely.
very soon, and then yeah, let's keep this conversation going, because I think that's extremely important, especially nowadays where people are freaking out, at least
Yeah,
some of them. Maybe we can be some source of information to help them to kind of calm their emotions, and then help them with kind of figure out this whole thing out, because I know there's a lot of things ahead of us, and there's a lot of things unfolding at the front of our eyes. So
definitely, definitely. Well, Rafal, thank you as always. It's so great to talk to you, and have an awesome week. All right.
absolutely. Okay, take care.
All right. I'll see you next time.